So it's important to know that white therapists can be anti-racist therapists. And what I mean by that, as opposed to just cultural competence, right? Cultural competence is often about have you learned some information about different communities? Do you have some sense of your own identity? But to have an anti-racist stance is more active. It is more intentional. And some directories or mental health networks have started educating communities of color to tell them that it's a small percentage of psychologists and mental health professionals that are ethnic minority. And so as they're looking for therapists, and even you can have an ethnic minority therapist who does not have that consciousness around being actively anti-racist. So what these networks are recommending to people when they call to look for a therapist is to ask them, what are your thoughts about the impact of racism on mental health? What are your thoughts about the impact of white supremacy on mental health? As a taste test, like a measure of, and if the answer is, well, I believe people are people, well, then there you have your answer, that this is not someone who is going to be able to acknowledge and engage with you because they're not even willing to acknowledge that it exists and that it has an impact, right? And so it's important to be able to communicate awareness and compassion that these events are happening, that oppression is a reality now, right? So the historical piece is helpful to know. And it is very, very important to be able to not go into victim blaming. So when we go into trying to defend and explain people who have said or done harmful things, then it lets the client know this is someone who is not really safe for me. They're not really for me. And what it requires from us, when I say from us, I mean, whenever you're a part of the majority group, is to release my defensiveness, because our usual tendency is to connect with the person we see as a reflection of ourselves, right? Because if the mom did something bad, then maybe that means I do something bad, so that I need to make it okay, right? And so, the example that comes to me from my own experience is around working with clients with disabilities as an able-bodied person. And I was teaching multicultural psychology, and I had a guest presenter who uses a wheelchair. And she was talking about coming across the campus, this place where I used to teach, and the invisibility of systematically everyone refusing to look at her, right? That no one will, as she came across the campus, no one would look at her. So in my able-bodiedness, what my defensive instinct, which I didn't speak on, but what came to my mind was, like, I know what that is because I have done it in terms of trying not to stare, looking away, right? Without ever taking into consideration, what would it feel like if everyone does that? If everyone is averting their gaze, right? And again, that difference between intention and impact. Even if you did not intend to be rude or mean, that it is an erasure, right? And so to be able to sit with that. And that's what I would say for white clinicians when ethnic minority client is describing an experience, your instinct may be to try to figure out how they could be interpreting it incorrectly, right? Because we want to believe that things are fair and right, and maybe I would do that, or maybe my cousin would do that, and we're not bad people. But instead, to really sit with, what is it this person is saying, and what we cannot fully imagine, but what might it be like to have that experience? And then to respond with that support. And I want to say, actually, that can be very therapeutic and healing in a way that hits on another level than them hearing it from me, right? And what I mean by that is when I've had rape survivors who were raped by a man, had a male therapist tell them how wrong that was of what happened to them, it registers in another way because this person, in some ways, they identify with that group, right? And so instead of feeling powerless, like, oh, I won't be able to help my ethnic minority clients, instead, with humility, because people have talked about now, not just cultural competence, but cultural humility, which is, I don't know everything, and a continuous learning and an openness and a recognition. So with humility and compassion, that this could really be a therapeutic moment. It could really be healing.